Less than a month ago, an assailant entered a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, and intent on slaughtering black Americans, killing 10 people and injuring 2 others before he was eventually stopped by police. Tragically, since that appalling attack, our nation watched with horror as 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered in their classrooms in Uvalde. Healthcare workers were killed in a Tulsa hospital, and frankly, too many Americans and communities all across our country were slain in attacks that went as they went about their daily lives. These attacks and the loss of these lives is certainly heartbreaking, and I appreciate the work of our Senate colleagues who are currently working on proposals to address the epidemic of gun violence in our nation. It's long past time for the Senate to take action. Today's hearing is focused on the specific and heinous domestic terrorism threat that is posed by white supremacist violence. According to the Anti-Defamation League, between 2012 and 2021, white supremacists were responsible for the majority of murders committed by any kind of extremist group in the United States. Of the 443 extremist murders during the past decade, 244 of them were committed by white supremacists. In comparison, the murders committed by left-wing extremists during the same period accounted for 18 of the 443 murders, or 4% of the extremist killings. And even this data likely fails to capture the full extent of the threat. In 2019, I authored a provision that was signed into law requiring the FBI and DHS to report to Congress and the public on domestic terrorism incidents, including the exact number and type. As of today, they have failed to fully comply with this requirement. In the years after September 11th attacks, our nation focused immense resources on combating the foreign threat from terrorism. There's no question those efforts were needed and that they helped keep Americans safe. But despite clear data showing the threat posed by domestic extremism, particularly white supremacist and anti-government violence, our nation's counterterrorism agencies have not been as nimble or as proactive as needed to effectively track or address this pernicious threat. And while I'm grateful to the Biden administration for laying out the first national strategy to address domestic terrorism, there's more that we must do as a nation to stop the spread of the hateful and insidious ideologies of white supremacy that are leading to real-world violence. In the Buffalo attack, the perpetrator allegedly posted a manifesto online detailing his carefully calculated attack and cited abhorrent ideas tied to Great Replacement Theory, a racist and dangerous ideology that claims Jewish people, immigrants, and people of color are actively attempting to replace the white population. This disgusting belief is at the center of some of the most horrific terrorist attacks that we have seen in recent years. In the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, neo-Nazis marched in broad daylight, chanting core tenets of replacement theory at one of the largest and most violent gatherings of white supremacists in decades, before an attacker plowed his vehicle through a crowd of peaceful protesters, killing 1 woman and injuring 35 others. In 2018, an anti-Semitic terrorist committed the deadliest attack on the Jewish community in our nation's history when he massacred 11 people and wounded 6 others at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His motive for the attack was rooted in replacement theory, and he claimed he targeted the synagogue because they were supporting refugees who had come to the United States. In 2019, a shooter in Christchurch, New Zealand, posted a manifesto online entitled "The Great Replacement" before live streaming his attack on 2 mosques on Facebook. And in 2019, shooting in El Paso, Texas, the deadliest attack on the Latino community in our nation's history, a gunman killed 22 people and left dozens wounded. The perpetrator acted out of the belief of a, quote, Hispanic invasion, end of quote, in a manifesto he posted online that cited the Christchurch shooter. Once relegated to the fringes of our society, these extreme and abhorrent beliefs are now a constant presence in our nation's mainstream. Cable TV hosts push them in prime time, nightly programs, and public leaders amplify them to their followers for their own profit and political gain. These are public figures who should know better and should know the power of their words and their influence. Figures who should know that the spread of conspiracy theories and lies can be incredibly dangerous. But between political opportunists and the power of social media to spread memes, manifestos, and videos like wildfire, these repugnant ideologies are becoming normalized into our everyday discourse. No longer do extremists need to be recruited or seek out like-minded individuals. They can simply log on to social media or turn on the television and be presented with the hateful discourse that drives these violent and deadly attacks. Attacks that not only leave traumatic scars on the victims and survivors and their families, but terrorize entire communities who will live with this threat in the back of their minds as they go about their daily business. And the consequences reach far beyond our borders. These ideologies often spread globally by white nationalist groups that share ideologies and tactics in online communities, in chat rooms and message boards, as we saw with the Christchurch attack. And although this committee has spent a considerable amount of time examining how to keep our communities safe, and I have been proud to work with my colleagues to boost important security resources like the nonprofit security grant program, we cannot solve this problem by only focusing our efforts on hardening the likely targets or by adding more security measures. We must come together as Americans from all walks of life and from all ends of the political spectrum to condemn these poisonous ideologies and the violence that they incite if we're going to truly tackle this driving factor out of our current domestic terrorism threat. I'm very grateful to our expert witnesses who are with us here today, and I encourage my colleagues to join me in having a productive conversation about what our nation can do to turn back the tide of this hateful, insidious, and violent threat. Ranking Member Portman, you're recognized for your opening comment.